Today's daf we're going to be learning is Shevuot daf Lamed Bet. It's the daf for Chag Shavuot. We're going to get started from the Gemara at the very bottom of Lamed Aleph Lamed Bet. Just to do a quick review of the first cases in the Mishnah, we had what exactly is a Shevuot Edut? How does it happen? Either somebody says, testify on my behalf, right? The person who is trying to get money out of somebody else, the plaintiff, and the person says, Shevuah she'ein ani yodim lach edut, or the two witnesses say, we take an oath that we do not know testimony, or amrulo ein ani yodim lach edut, or they said, listen, we don't know any testimony for you. When the person said, yeah, and again, the person said, come testify. They said, we don't know anything. Okay, no oath yet. Then the person says, mashbiya ani alechem. I'm making you take an oath about this. V'amru amen. And then they said amen, or it's possible it even works even if they don't say amen, but if they deny. And that's what we're going to call kofil. And then if the person denies it after the witnesses deny it, after the plaintiff says, take an oath, and they say no, or they say amen, meaning, we take an oath that we don't know anything, then they're liable. So now we're going to get into more details of this today. Starting with the Gemara now. Amar Shmuel, Ra'u sheratz achareihem. Okay, if he saw the witnesses, saw the plaintiff running after them, Amrulo, ma taratz achareinu, shvuah ein anu yodim l'chayidut. Person didn't say anything, but the plaintiff is running after the witnesses, and the witnesses are saying, we don't know anything, we promise you. Now, the plaintiff never came to them and said, do you come testify for me? We're missing that element to it. So if that's the case, until person actually says, testify for me. So now the Gemara says, my kamash malan. Again, I'm still doing a review from the bottom of Lamed Aleph and Bet. Person says, what's this teaching you? The Gemara says, I don't understand. We already learned this. Tanina, it already says in the Mishna. Shilach biyadav o shamar lehem anitba, right? If either the plaintiff sends his slave, or amar lahem anitba, or the other side, the defendant says, mashbiani alechem she'im atem yodim lo edut shetavo v'tiyiduhu. The defendant says, take an oath, okay, that I make you take an oath that you don't know anything for the plaintiff. Harei elu pturim ad sheyishmeu mipi hatovea. It has to be, they have to hear from the tovea. The tovea has to be the one demanding the testimony. Without that, there's no Shevuot Edu. So, right, Ratz Achareihem, it's Tzrich. What do you need Ratz Achareihem? The Tovea, the plaintiff never asked them. It's obviously missing one of the key components. So the Gemara says it's a little different than the case where it's the other side that brings them or their own messenger. Because Sakadat Achamina, Kevan de Ratz Achareihem, Keman de Amar Leudami. Maybe the fact that the plaintiff is running after them is an indicator that he or she wants them to testify, as opposed to some other stranger saying it or the other side saying it. That's different. There, you never had any indication from the plaintiff that the plaintiff was looking to get the testimony. Here, you actually have an indication they're running. This reminds us of a sugya in Gitin, if you remember, where the husband wants to cancel the witnesses and he's running after them to say, don't bring the get to the wife. Okay, the messenger, sorry, not witnesses, the messenger's on the way to deliver the get, and the husband starts running after the messenger. Yeah, and then the messenger, there was a case where the messenger, they covered their ears, and they said, oh, we don't hear anything, so there can't be betul get. And they said, isn't it a giloi milt? If you remember, it's one of the famous 6 machlokot between Abai and Rava, where we pass like Abai, whether we say giloi milt is enough or it's not enough, because the person didn't actually cancel the get, but it looked like they were going to. Said, well, maybe he's running after us because he wants to say, go, 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 go quickly. That was a whole interesting sugya, and this is kind of similar. Now they say, okay, wait, if that's what you want to teach us, that because the person's running, not enough of an indication, and because of that, it's not called a Shevuot Edut, and again, the witnesses will be exempt. V'hanami tanina, but that also we have in a Braita. Shevuot Edut ketzad. How does in a Mishna? Sorry, Shevuot Edut ketzad, and that's right. What did we have in our Mishnah? Amar le'edim bo v'yiduni, Shevuah, etc. Amar in lo amar lo. Notice the way the Mishnah described the case. The case started with Amar le'edim. It's very clear here that there has to be an amirah, a statement that was said by the plaintiff. So, of course, it's not going to be, right? We're not going to have it that if the person was just running and didn't actually say anything, right? Amar in, lo amar lo, right? Right? If the person said it, yes. If the person didn't say it, it wouldn't work. That seems clear from our Mishnah. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily the case. Lav dafka, not necessarily. To ilo temahachi, and the way they're going to prove this is if you don't say this, let's look at a different Mishnah about a Shevuot HaPikadon. Pikadon de katane, it says Shevuot HaPikadon ketzad. How does a Shevuot HaPikadon work? Amar lo, tanli pikadon sheyesh biyadcha. So one side comes to the other and says, okay, listen, you have something of mine in your house, where here we again have Amar lo. It starts with me claiming you have something of mine in your house. Hachanami, Amarin, lo Amar lo. Wait, and then you deny the claim. Now, if you deny that you have an item in my house that I'm claiming is mine, that's a Shevuot HaPikadon, according to the Mishnah. Now, what if you just come to court and claim you don't have my item? That's not a Shevuot HaPikadon. It has to be that I demand it from you. Shevuot HaEdu, yes, but who says Shevuot HaPikadon, yes, right? Amar in lo, Amar lo, right? Havachichesh ba'amito kolduhu. It says in the Torah, chichesh ba'amito, you denied it. It doesn't matter whether I said, give me the Pikadon or didn't. Either which way, you deny that you have something of mine in your house. Like, let's say somebody else came and asked you for it and said, you have that thing, that's Michelle's, return it. And then you deny the claim in court and take an oath. So of course you're going to be liable. So it's not just only when it says Amar lo, it's not dafka, that it has to be in that way. Ela Amar lav dafka, right? So there, clearly in Pikadon, Amar is not necessarily. Hachanami lav dafka will say the same thing by us. Now the Gemara is going to reject this answer because the Gemara is going to say, hi, my, wait, is this really the case? If you're going to say like this, it's going to work. But if you say like that, it's not going to work. So what's this and that? If you're going to say Amar by us was definite, deliberate, Tanahatam atuhacha. Then we understand why in the Pikadon Mishnah did it say Amar lo? Because they were, here it was necessary. There it wasn't necessary, but they used the same language. But lo Amar dahatam dafka, the Amar here is not specifically, it has to be here. Below Amar dahacha dafka, and not the Amar there is specific and deliberate. Then Amar lama li laminie. Why, if it wasn't deliberate here, then there's no reason for it to be there, in which case, why do we even have this at all? So therefore, they say, actually, the Amar must be necessary here and deliberate, and it's only if Amar, and there the language just matched up, in which case, we're back to our problem, which is, right, it sounded like, right, that the whole issue of Ratzach Harihem, you could have learned from our Mishnah, and why is Shmuel telling us something that's already clear from our Mishnah? To which the Gemara answers, no. You could just say, maybe the Mishnah was just using a regular language that normally happens, right? Usually what happens is you're not going to start coming to court and saying, I don't know any testimony for you unless you actually ask me. And that's why the Mishnah said, Amrlo, there, because that's usually the way it happens. Even in Pikadon, you could say the same thing. Usually the way it happens. And therefore, it's not necessarily clear from our Mishnah that it has to be Amar, and that's what Shmuel is adding. No, there has to be an Amirah. Couldn't have learned from our Mishnah, but it is the case. Tanya Kavatei de Shmuel, here's a bright to support Shmuel. Ra'uhu shabach if they saw him coming after them. Amrulo, ma tabach harenu, shvua she'enanu yodim l'chayidut. And then they say, what are you running after us? We swear we don't have any testimony for you. Pturin, okay, they're exempt. B'pikadon chayavi. Okay, but if it was a pikadon and they say that, they're liable because, again, in a pikadon, you don't need the tovea to actually have to ask them. Any kind of denial will be a denial. And that matches perfectly with what Shmuel said. Now we're moving on to the next section of the Mishnah. Hishbia alehem chamisha pa'amim. Okay, so then we had this case where outside of court, the person said, I swear that you don't have any testimony for me. And the person said, I don't know, or we don't know exactly what they answered, or maybe they said amen outside the court. Then they get into the court and then they deny the claim, right? Remember, if they go into the court and they admit that they have testimony, then actually they're exempt from the Shevuot HaEdu. But if they come into court and they deny it, they're liable 5 times because for each time that the person outside the court said, take an oath, take an oath, take an oath, right? On all those oaths, we're liable. So first the Gemara says, where do we get that the denial has to be outside the court? Amar Abai, Amar Kra, Im lo yagiv v'nasavo. No, that's our pasuk, right? If you don't tell, you will bear the iniquity of this. Lo amarti l'cha ela b'makom she'ilu magid zeh mitchayev zeh mamon. This only can happen in a place where the denial was done in the place where the testimony could have happened. Im lo yagiv, if you don't say it, meaning you don't say it in the place where you were supposed to say it, which is the court. Only if you come testify in a court will you be able to convict the person of paying. And therefore, the case is only going to be in the case where you denied it in court. Well, if this whole thing has to be in the court, then maybe the entire thing has to be in the court. And how do you know that if the plaintiff said, I take an oath 5 times outside the court, and then the person comes into court, the witnesses, and they deny it, they're liable, the Shevuot, but maybe the oath, the hishbia, mashbiani alech, all right, I'm making you take an oath of the plaintiff, has to be done in the court as well. It sounds like the whole thing has to be done in the court. To which Abai answers back to Rav Papa, lo sakadatach, this doesn't seem reasonable. It doesn't seem like this is the case. Now, the way he's going to prove it is an interesting way of proving it. What he's going to do is he's going to bring a drasha, which proves that there's a case of being liable 5 times. And if you move the entire thing to the court, meaning all the oaths to the court as well, there's no way you're going to have a case where you're liable 5 times, which means that whole drasha will have nowhere to be effective, which means it must not be the case, what we just said. So you'll see this inside as we go through. Ditanya. La'achat. Okay, this is in the Psukim in Vayikra Hey, which we've been learning a lot. This in this Masechet Nefesh Kitach. V'hayaki yasham la'achat me'ele. Okay, and this is after it lists all the different times you have to bring a korban olev yored. It says if you are guilty for any of these things, v'hit vada asher chatala, and you testify and you admitted to it. Now it says yasham la'achat me'ele, for one of these. Now the simple reading is for one of the things we mentioned above. But there's a drasha on this le'echat, lechayev kol echat ve'echat. There could be cases where you're liable many times for the same thing. You have to bring several sacrifices. Now, isa kadatach bebeitin, if you say the whole oath happened in court and the denial happened in court, mi mechayev kol echat ve'echat, you would never be liable for each one, because what did we learn already from the Mishna? Hadran, hishbia alehem chamisha pa'amim b'fnei beitin v'kafru. If the 5 times of the oath was in the court, and each time the person denied it in the court, you're only liable 1. Why are you only liable 1? Because once you say something in court, once you say something, you can't retract your statement. So once you took an oath in court, there's no meaning to any further oaths, and therefore you're only liable 1. So now, must be the Shevuot chutz lebeitin, and the kfira is bebeitin. Because again, the kfira has to be in the court because im lo yagiv v'nasavo, no, it has to be in the place where it's normally said. However, it can't be all the oaths were in the court, because if all the oaths were in the court, only one denial, right, there would only be one lie, there would be only one, that one denial would only incur one oath, a korban, a sacrifice for one oath, whereas if it were all done, and if the oaths were done outside the court, you could have a case where you're liable 5. That one denial in the court goes back to all the oaths that the plaintiff had said, and the person will be liable 5. And remember, there's a drasha that says there's a case where you're liable more, like 5, let's say, for example, where you're chayav kol echat ve'echat, and there would be no case if everything happened in the court. So that drasha would be irrelevant, right? It wouldn't be a drasha, and therefore this doesn't work. Okay, and as therefore that explanation can't be that it all happened in the court. So it's not that there's a reason. This is like an external reason, because that drasha would never apply anywhere, would not be effective, and there is a drasha that says there's a case where you're liable many times. That would be the only way if the oaths happen outside the court and the denial happened in the court. Continuing on. If both of them deny it at the same time, this is the next line in the Mishna, both witnesses deny at the same time, they're both liable, right? But if you remember, if it's bezeh charzeh, one after the other, then the first one could have actually made the person liable to pay had they come and given testimony, and therefore they're going to be liable for denying to give the testimony because they were coming with another witness. But the second witness, when the second witness testifies, the first witness has already been done and knocked out. So that, right, has already said, I don't know anything. And therefore, the second one wouldn't be able to affect any kind of payment because Eid Echad is not Mechayev Mamon, isn't able to obligate someone to pay money, and therefore the second one would be exempt. So now the Gemara says, how can you say if they both denied it together? Together means together exactly at the same time. But you can't have two people, even if, let's say, okay, first of all, usually in court, one goes after the other. Even if they were to speak at the same time, there's no such thing as at the exact same time. People can't, right? It's like synchronized swimming or it's very hard to get everything exactly in sync and to be able to say it at exactly the same time. So how could you ever have that? And if it's already not exactly at the same time, then one is after the other. Interesting question. So Amar Rav Chisda Hamani Rabbi Yossi Aglili Amar Charlotte Samse. So maybe we just have to say that the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili's position where he actually thinks it's possible. It's possible to do things at exactly the same moment. Rabbi Yochanan wants to give a better or an explanation that has the Mishnah according with all the opinions. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Filu Tema Rabbanan Kigon Kaplu Shnehem B'toch Kedei Dibbur. Toch Kedei Dibbur Kedibur Dami. This we've seen many times that if they speak one within the time of toch kedei dibbur of the other, that is considered as if they spoke at the same time. So what's toch kedei dibbur? That's the time it takes to say Shalom Alecha Rabbi Mori. Okay, hello to you, my teacher and my rabbi and my teacher. And if you do it within that time frame, that will be considered as if you did it all at once. But Rav Achami Difti says to Ravina, I don't understand. Right? The way it would take for a student to say shalom to their teacher. But the assumption here, it's a bit of a strange assumption, but the toch kedei dibbur means that when the first one comes to testify, from the beginning, where do we count toch kedei dibbur? The second one has to speak within a toch kedei dibbur of the beginning of the first person's words. Now, if we're assuming they're testifying one after the other, even though we're calling it at the same time, but one is toch kedei dibbur of the other, until the first person says, Shevuot ein ani yodim l'chaydut, I take an oath that we don't know testimony for you, tuvahavet, that's already longer than Shalom Alecha Rabbi Mori. And when the next person starts, it's already not toch kedei dibbur of the beginning of the words of the other. So Amarle, what you would have expected him to answer, he says, Kol echad toch kedei dibbur, Kol echad toch kedei dibburo shel chavero. No, what we mean is, by the time the person ends, it has to be toch kedei dibbur. The second one has to start within a toch kedei dibbur of the first, and then we view this all as one. So we have either Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Mishnah is only Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and he holds you can actually do synchronized testimony, or we say, no, it could even accord with the rabbis as long as you hold the toch kedei dibbur is kedibur dami, meaning one testifies and within a toch kedei dibbur, right, those few split seconds, then the other one has already started speaking. Then we view it as one testimony, and they both deny it, they both have to bring the sacrifice. Now we go to the next line, which is, if they did it one after the other, the first one is liable for the Shevuot ha'edut, and the second one is not. Now we're going to start along. So yeah, really, most of it is a tangent. Our Mishnah doesn't accord with the following Tana. Which Tana? We're going to see in a minute. It doesn't accord with Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov. Ditanya, mashpia eid echad patur. Okay, if you're mashpia, one witness has testimony, and the plaintiff says, come testify, and the witness says, no, I deny it, right? They do the mashpiani, and right, they're exempt. One witness is exempt. Why? Because one witness can't incur a monetary payment. But Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon mechayev. Rabbi Shimon says you're liable, and that seems to be the machloket here, right? Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon would say one witness obligates, right? Will be obligated to bring a korban of Shevuot ha'edut, korban olevi yored. That goes against our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says if the one is left alone, because the first one was already, right, they came separately. So once the first one denied, the second one can't really do anything on their own, right? They can't be Chayav Mamon. So because of that, you'll be exempt. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, one witness by themselves can be. So therefore, of course, this one witness is going to have to bring a Shevuot ha'edut. Now, let's try to understand what the machloket is. And then, therefore, explain that Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, I think I said Rabbi Lazar, I meant Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, in the end, doesn't accord with our Mishnah. Let's assume the root of their machloket is this. Now, this brings us back to laws of mamonot. What happens when one witness comes to testify? Let's say there's something in your house that I claim is mine, you claim it's yours. One witness testifies that the item is mine. So that gives me the opportunity. What that means is if you want to keep the item, since one witness said it's mine, that's not enough. You don't have to return it to me. But if you want to keep it, you have to take an oath that it's yours. That Eid Echad can obligate or does obligate the person to take an oath, not to have to pay it back. But now, let's think about it. If you don't take the oath, what will happen? If you decide not to take it, you're going to have to pay me. So theoretically, it's somewhat connected to Mammon, but not exactly. So now we're going to say, Tanakama hold that when Eid Echad comes, what are they trying to do? That aide who testified for me knew that I wasn't going to really get the item. They were just trying to get me to take it, to get you to take an oath. If you're not willing to take the oath, you'll have to pay me. But the real goal was to get you to take the oath. Okay, so kiata l'shvuah hu tekata. It's for the oath. Umar savar eid echad kiata limamona kata. The other one says, no. They're coming to obligate a monetary payment because in the end, if that a lot of people don't like taking oaths. So if that person's not willing to take the oath, let's say, I say it's in your house, it's mine, then you'll have to pay it back to me. So Rabbi Shimon views this as a moment payment. So now they say, wait a minute. That can't be the root of the machloket. And as we were trying to say, our Mishna doesn't accord like Rabbi Shimon because of that. But now they say, what are you talking about? That's not Batizbra. That's not the machloket. Hamar Abaye. And now we're going to quote this long thing Abaye says. And what the Gemara is going to do after this is explain each part of the machlok of this statement of Abaye about all different kinds of testimonies, and specifically Rabbi Shimon, and the rabbis in their machloket. On what point, in what cases would they agree? On what cases do they disagree? And from one of these cases, we're going to get to what's the root of the machloket, and it's not what we just said. Okay? So we're going to have to be patient until we get there because it's hard to explain this without reading it inside. So now they're going to say, V'tizpra can't be. Hamar Abaye, hakol modim be'ed sota. They both agree when it comes to the witness of a sota. Hakol modim be'ede sota. They both agree when it comes to the witnesses for sota. Umachloke be'ede sota. And they have a disagreement about ede sota. Okay, this is obviously he's trying to give like a playful way of remembering things. Okay, they all agree with one witness in a sota. They all agree about two witnesses in a sota, and they all agree about and they have a machloket about two witnesses of a sota. This also, you could say like a playful way, you could also say it's a riddle, right? And it's, how could you have, they all agree in this, they all agree in that, and they disagree about that when it all sounds kind of similar, right? One is one witness, but the other two are two witnesses. What are we talking about, right? It's really kind of a riddle. And, okay, we don't know yet which one is relevant, but we'll get there. They all agree in one witness. And they all agree when the other witness, like in the case, let's say that I gave up the Shevuot, that you have something of mine and you're supposed to take the Shevuot, but if you can't take the Shevuot, then I can take the Shevuot to get the money. Okay, I could say, oh, that item's mine, and I could take an oath about it since you're not an honest person, and since you're not an honest person, like let's say you're a thief, your oath isn't believed, and therefore this case, we're actually everyone agrees that one witness could actually create a monetary payment because I could take the oath, right? If they deny, right, that's causing me a loss of money because I theoretically could take an oath and get the money if I wanted. We're going to get into all these, so if you didn't really get it, don't worry. Okay, so now let's go through our cases and we'll see which one is relevant. Okay, if you can already tell which one is relevant because it's going to be the one that's the machloket. There's only one case where there's machloket be'edei sota in one of the sota cases, and then we're going to explain the machloket is based on something else, and not does the Eid Echad come to obligate an oath, or does the Eid Echad come to obligate money? So let's see. Sorry. Okay, be'ed sota kobodim be'ed. Okay, so now. Ella. Okay. Ella. Okay, so now we're going to say the following. Because the machloket is be'edei sota, and even though you don't yet know, but it's going to be based on something else, they're going to say, and now they're going to tell you what it's based on, but we'll read it all inside and understand it better after. Everybody thinks one witness comes to obligate an oath, not money. However, in one of the sota cases, which we'll see, the machloket is this. Mar savar davar goem lemamon kimamon dami. Umar savar lav kimamon dami. Something that could theoretically lead to a monetary payment, is that considered money or not? So in a case where the oath could theoretically lead to a monetary payment, or could likely lead to a monetary payment, you would have to say, there's a good chance that this oath would have led someone, and then you denied giving the testimony. Your testimony would have led to something. the testimony would have likely led to a monetary payment, even though it's not completely clear that it's going to. Do we view that as money or not? Okay, because usually an Eid Echad can only obligate a Shevuot. But in a case where we'll actually likely, again, not definitely, likely cause a monetary payment, that's davar hagorem lemamon, it will cause a monetary payment, meaning it'll likely cause a monetary payment. Then do we view that like the Eid is Machayev Mamon, which is Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, which means therefore it will be a Shevuot Eidud, and if the aid denies it and takes an oath and lied, we're going to obligate them, or no? Okay, and that's again, if the aid denies giving the testimony. Goof. So now let's understand this very riddled statement. Amar Baya, komodim be'ed sota, v'komodim be'ed sota, v'chloka be'ed sota. So we're going to start with that one, and then they even give the whole thing. Komodim be'ed echad, komodim be'ed echad shekenegdo chashul shvuot. That was the whole list. Now they're going to go to the first one. Hakomodim be'ed sota shechayav. Which aid? Now the sota has three parts. First, there's Adim who say that the husband, Adim who saw the husband testify that he's jealous of his wife and thinks she's doing something with some other man. Then she has to go into the room alone with another man, and we need two witnesses for that. Then, if there's a witness that says that she slept with him in the room and he saw that, even one witness is acceptable. We're going to see that right now. That's the first case. What's that case? Okay, so now, again, they're just reading the Hakomodim be'ed sota shechayav. Everyone agrees that one witness for Tuma, okay, what's this time about? Be'ed Tuma. Why? When does the sota woman drink the waters? When there's no witness. Now, when is there? Now, that proves that when there is one witness, actually she doesn't drink the sota waters. Why? If one witness saw her in the room with the man, engaging in relations, then that woman is guilty. What happens? The husband divorces her and she loses her ketubah money, which means there's a monetary payment here. So if that witness who saw they have relations and doesn't testify, that actually could create a mammon payment. So that's the case of one witness where everyone agrees, of course you're going to be chayav Shevuot Eidud if you deny it, because right, that's actually going to cause that your denial to testify is going to cause this person to lose, right? The husband is going to lose out on getting the ketubah money from her. So that's the case of Hakomodim. V'Hakomodim be'edei sota shepatul. When do we say in Eidei Sota the patur? That was the next one. Everyone agrees with two witnesses, shepatur be'edei kinoi. The first stage. At the first stage of kinoi, when the husband warned the wife, if we had two witnesses there and now they claim, oh, we don't know anything, everyone agrees that they're exempt from Shevuot Eidud. Why? Because that doesn't create any monetary payment yet, because this is called a have gorem digorim. This is something that could lead to something which could lead to a payment, because again, after kinoi, you still have to have the stira. She still has to go in the room alone with the man, and even that won't necessarily mean that she's going to lose her ketubah money, because maybe nothing transpired there, right? And that would have to then go to the Beit HaMikdash to drink the waters, and only if she's guilty, yes, or if she admits it at that stage. That's another possibility, right? Theoretically, it's actually only a gorim to gorim, because after the stira, after the witnesses, she was in a room alone with the man, likely the woman won't want to go through the process, and likely she'll just testify right then and there, even if she weren't guilty. There's a likelihood she's going to testify. And Rashi says this in the last line of this Amud, Shema miyirat hamayim todesh nitma'a v'tafsik ketubata. Maybe from being scared, right? We want to go through the sota process, she might just admit it. So if there's Eidei Kinoi, and they deny that they were Eidei Kinoi, that they saw this, that will basically prevent the husband from possibly losing money, but only possibly, because you would still need Eidei Stira, and after that, you would need the woman to admit. So that's like already more removed from a monetary payment. Turning out on a bed. Now, this is the key case, and this is the case that we were looking for, to say the machloka between them is not is Eid Echad creating a Shevuot or Mammon, right? Because here, let's see the machloka. We're going to see the machloka is not about that. Machloket be'edei sota. Again, this means Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and the rabbis disagree in a different case with the Eidei Sota. What are these? Well, we already discussed the Eidei Tuma. We already discussed the Eidei Kinoi. What's left? The Eidei Stira. The ones at that later stage. Machloket be'edei sota is be'edei stira. Mar savar. Now here already, we already got rid of the first. We already have the Kinoi. And now, two witnesses saw her go into a room alone with a man, and they're denying. Now, let's think about what that would cause. That would likely cause the woman, okay, this is going to be called davar, not gorim to gorim, it's davar ha-gorim lemamon. And this is what we want to say the machloket is. Because this is davar gorim lemamon, ki mamon dame, v'chayav. Mar savar, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, listen, If these two witnesses don't say she was in the room alone with the man, they are likely causing a loss of money for the husband. Why? Because likely, if they had testified, okay, let's say there's two possibilities. Either the woman slept with the man or she didn't sleep with the man in the room, right? Just because she went into the room alone doesn't mean they engaged in relations. But let's say it's 50-50. So 50% chance she engaged in relations, which means she would be liable to give him all the tuba money, right? Or 50% chance that she didn't, and then she wouldn't. But even within the 50% chance, how are we going to figure that out? We're going to have her drink the soda waters. But it's a likely chance within that 50% that the woman will say, I don't want to drink the soda waters. I'll just admit it. I'll get divorced. I'll lose my tuba money. Better that than go through the SOTA process, which means that if we do this in percentages, again, one could claim it's not exactly a percentage game here because maybe it's more likely one or the other. Like if they were in the room alone with the man, it's probably likely they engaged in relations already. If husband was worried about her being with this man and then they were in the room and the door was closed and all that. But still, right, we could look at it that way, or we could say, even within the 50% chance that she's not guilty, there's still a 50% within that, which would make it 75% altogether, that she's just going to admit and she'll have to pay the k'tuba money, she'll have to lose her k'tuba money, which means that this is something that likely, if they had testified, it would cause the husband to get money. They're not testifying as causing a loss of money for the husband of losing the k'tuba money, because now he still owes her, right? And so he'll have to pay the wife the k'tuba money, whereas otherwise he won't have to pay. And also he gets all her k'tuba stuff, right? All the money she brought into the wedding and all that. So Mar Savar, right? The first opinion is Savar Graham Mamon is Kimamon Dami, and that's why they would be liable for lying here for Shevuot Ha'edut. Umar Savar, and the rabbis say Lav Kimamon Dami, Upatur. No, just because it'll likely, it's not going to directly cause, it's still grama, right? It's still indirect because something else has to happen. And therefore, they're exempt. And that was the case that showed that that's the machloket and not is the Eid. So everyone agrees Eid is really coming to be chayav shvua. However, if it's a gorem lemamon, that's where they have a machloket. And that basically shows that our Mishna, right? In our Mishna, basically, no one would think that it's a Shevuot ha'edut, right? We would say our Mishna could have quoted Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon because in a regular Eid Echad case, even Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon thinks that it only creates a Shvuah. An Eid Echad is only creating an oath, which isn't a monetary thing, and only in a unique case like a sota, where it's likely going to create a mammon thing, he would say you'd be liable. Okay, but now we're going to continue on in all these cases that we already started. Okay, so everyone agrees we'll explain momentarily, and everyone agrees be'ed echad. What's the eid echad case? Rabbi Abba. Okay, like the nask of Rabbi Abba, you might remember it, you might not. We learned it I think it was in Baba Metzia. Anyway, we'll get back there. First, they're going to do akomodim shekenegdo chashud al shvua. What would be the case? De chashid man. Okay, wait. Which one was chashud? So let's try to figure this out. Elam, we're going to assume it's a malva and a love. Okay, we have the guy who borrowed and the guy who lent. Now, normally, what would happen if an Eid Echad says the lender, right, isn't supposed to get any money, right, and the borrower already returned the money. So the borrower, you always use the shvua to keep the money in where it is. So the love would take an oath. I gave back the money. So Elam, now, what if he's chashud al shvua? Let's say the love is a liar, okay, known to be a liar from some other case. If it's chashid love, de amar malve, now the malve would then say, I atit asid li, right? So now the malve goes to two witnesses that basically saw that, the money wasn't given back, right? How they would know that? It's a good question, but know that the loan was still valid. And they didn't testify. Hava mishtabana v'shakilna. So the malva could say, listen, I would have, now, what would happen? If the witness had come forward, then the malva would be able to take an oath, and the malva could say, I would have taken an oath, and I would have gotten the money back. But the the aid could say to the malva, you can't make me pay a shvuot ha'edut. That wouldn't have necessarily made you get money, and I caused you to lose money, because mi yemer de mishtabat. Who's to say you would have taken an oath? People don't like taking oaths. So again, there's something missing there. Something else has to transpire. It's not just the testimony would cause mammon. This would be already more indirect, and it would be a problem because something else has to happen. The oath of the malva would have to happen in order to do this. So you can't say there that akomodim shekenegdo chashal al shvua, that they both agree if that's the case, then that's a davar hagorem l'mamon. It's exactly like the sota case, and then it would be a machloket. And it doesn't say it's a machloket. He said everyone agrees, and that's not an agreement because that's a davar hagorem l'mamon. It's something that could have caused monetary, but not necessarily. Okay, so therefore that doesn't work. So let's figure out what does. Ella kigon sheshnehem chashudim. Now we're going to say it's not shekenegdo chashal shvua means the other one is chashud. It's shekeneged each side. Both are not able to take an oath. Both are dishonest people. We have this big argument between two dishonest people. Now, what's the halacha here? And here we're going to see it's a definitive mammon claim because if both sides are chashud, de amar mar chazra shvuah lemechuyav la. So in the end, the shvuah is going to go back to the one who had to take the oath. So again, let's say I claim you have something of mine in your house. You claim you don't. Now, you should take the oath, but you can't because you're dishonest to keep it in your hands. I then have to take the oath, but I can't because I'm also dishonest if I want to get the money. So according to the halacha, Amar, somebody said, Chazra shvuah lemechuyav la, the shvuah goes back to you, but you can't take the oath. And mitoch she'eino yachol l'shavah mishalem. If you can't take the oath, or also, by the way, if you didn't want to take the oath, but in this case, since you can't take the oath, you actually have to pay. And therefore, again, if the witness wouldn't testify in a case where both sides are chashud, that's a unique case where an eid echad would actually obligate money. And since it would obligate money, right, therefore, everyone agrees that there's a shvuah ha'edut here if that one witness won't give testimony because he's causing a direct loss. So now we have this case of Rabbi Abba, this Naska de Rabbi Abba, and here everyone agrees with the Eid Echad case. So what's the case? Somebody stole a bar of silver from his friend. It came before Rabbi Ami the case. Rabbi Abba kamei. Okay, Rabbi Abba happened to be there. So one witness came and said that this person stole the silver. Amarle, the person who stole the silver, says, you're right, I did. In chatve, I stole it. But didi chatve, but I stole it. I didn't really steal it. I took it, but it was mine. That's why I took it, because it was mine. Now, here's a tricky case, because I'm a Rabbi Ami. So now Rabbi Ami, if you remember, Rabbi Ami was there, and Rabbi Abba was sitting with him. So Rabbi Ami didn't know what to do. How are the judges supposed to rule it in this case? Lishalem lekatresade. Okay, you can't say the guy has to pay the naska because there aren't two witnesses against him. And even though he admitted it, but he admitted it was his own, so why should he have to return it? Let's exempt him. But there is one witness that said he stole it. And the witness, right, is valid witness. And not only that, but the guy didn't even deny his claim. Lishtaba, so let's make the person take an oath that it's really his. Kevan da Amar in chatve v'didi chatve havalu kegazlan. Now there's different nuschaot here because the gazlan thing doesn't really fit exactly, but let's explain the way the commentaries explain this, whether we go with the word gazlan or we don't. But if the person who stole it now what happened? We have one witness that said the person stole it, and the person actually says, I did take it, you're right, okay, or the person took it. So the witness says, the plaintiff says, I did take it. Okay, sorry, the defendant says, I did take it, but it was my own, which means that what's the oath? The oath he's supposed to take when the person said you took it is the person supposed to say, I didn't take it, but they can't take it because they'll be lying. It's not true. They did take it, right? Their claim is not that I disagree with what the Eid Echad said. It's just that I disagree with the facts beforehand. It was actually mine. So they don't have an option to take an oath in this case. So Amar Leila Rabbi Abba, this is the classic case of Hamachuyav Shvuah, Ve'eno Yachol Lishavah, right? It's a case where someone is obligated to Shvuah, but they actually can't take the Shvuah because there is no Shvuah for them to take. They can't take the Shvuah that says, I didn't take it because he did take it. And there's a person obligated to Shvuah and they can't take the Shvuah, they actually have to pay. So this would be a case where the two witnesses, the one witness by not coming and not testifying is actually causing a monetary loss for the person who claims the silver was stolen from him. Because if that one witness had come, the one who said, yes, I stole it, but it was mine, would actually have to pay. Okay, that's a unique case. And in that unique case, they all agree because it's clearly money. Now Rav Papa's going to add more cases where they would both agree, so let's see. This is really a riddle. Both agree with an aid of death, that a witness who testifies to someone's death, that they're exempt, and also that they're obligated. So what would be the case? Let's say somebody came and said to this woman, I saw your husband was dead. Okay, generally we believe one witness to say someone's dead, but the witness didn't come to court. Witness just went to the woman, but didn't testify in court about it. Now, if this witness denies when the court comes and says, oh, I deny that I said the man was dead, well, actually the witness will be exempt. Why? It's not because this is a unique halacha. You might remember, we learned it in Yevamot. The woman herself can come and say, my husband died in court. And meit ba'ali tityaben. She says, my husband died. She also can have to be obligated in yibum. She can obligate herself for that. Now, what's the case, therefore? She can even say it even if she didn't see the husband died. Even if someone just told her, she can go to court. In this case, we allow what's called aid mipi aid, a witness to testify that a different witness said to them. So that means if this person won't go to court to say it, it doesn't matter because the woman could go to court herself. So they're not causing any loss for the woman. What's the loss, by the way? Once her husband's dead, she'd get her ketubah money. It's a monetary. It always has to be a monetary loss here for Shevuot aid to be relevant. What would that case be? What if he didn't tell her and he didn't tell the court? Well, then she can't go to court. And then by him withholding this testimony, he's causing her financial loss because she can't get her ketubah money. Shma mina. Now they're going to question this. This seems to imply something else, which is mashbiya ede karka chayav. Now, if you remember, a ketubah, the woman can really only collect her ketubah from property. Let's say the husband has no property, she can't collect it from movables. So that means, now, Shevuot Edut is usually on money, not on land, on movables. So now this seems to say the opposite, which is mashbiya ede karka chayav, right? If somebody says, promise, you really don't know any testimony about things related to land, they're actually obligated for Shevuot Edut because that's this case. So they say no. Dilma ditfise metaltale. It could be she already took metaltale. She already had metaltale of the husband's. She can claim, oh, I'm taking this on behalf of my ketubah. She can't take it from the orphans, but if it was already in her property, she could just say, oh, I'm using this for the payment of my ketubah. And then by him denying it, she will not be able to keep that. And then that would be incurring a monetary payment. So if you explain it that way, then it doesn't create this problem of the land. That was just a very side issue. Okay, now we're back to kafar echad vehoda echad. Okay, if one denied and the other admitted, then what do we say, right? The first one's liable, the second one's innocent. Okay, now that's obvious because hashta b'zer chazeh travayu kakafre, right? Even in the case where the second one denied it, the second one's going to be exempt, right? And said, I don't know testimony, and they did. Of course, in the case where the second one admitted they had testimony, of course they're not going to be liable. Why would you even need to say that, right? Why do you even need that case? Lo tzricha, it must be for a case kigon shekaflu shnehem v'chazar echad mehem v'hitvada b'toch kedei dibbur. They both denied it. Then the second one said, oh, wait, I changed my mind. I actually know testimony within toch kedei dibbur. Okay, and what do they want to teach you? Kamash malan toch kedei dibbur dami, that we view that as a hoda'ah. Now, even if it was a kfirah, they still wouldn't be chayav Shevuot Edut. But this is coming to teach you something completely different. That if somebody immediately, now, once you say something in court, you can't undo it. But if you undo it, toch kedei dibbur, and that's what this is teaching you. That it was a case, even though the simple reading doesn't appear that way, it says, right, one denied, the other admitted. Well, it must be they admitted within toch kedei dibbur that they had actually denied. So now they say, wait a minute. Going back to a previous machlokes we saw today, now, if you say the earlier part, like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he was teaching us that two witnesses could actually speak at the exact same time, then Reisha after the tzamtzim, Seifa Yitzrich Lachshmin and Toch Kedei Dibbur Kedibur Dam. And then we have one, like these are two completely different halachot from one part of the Mishna and the other. But, and you'll see the problem in a second, Rabbi Yochanan, we already learned the halacha of Toch Kedei Dibbur in the Reisha. Right, that if one speaks and the other one speaks toch kedei dibbur, we view that as if they both spoke at the same time, and therefore both of them have to bring the Shevuot Edut, right? Reisha toch kedei dibbur and Seifa toch kedei dibbur tartei lamali. Why do you need to teach me the same thing twice? Well, no, still there are two toch kedei dibburs that are different. Mao detema, you might have thought hanimili kfira al kfira. That's when they both deny, and we're going to say, do we view that as one testimony that they both are obligated Shevuot Edut? But kfira v'hoda'ah im alo. But in this case, when a person changes what they said, that's a completely different thing. The person said, I don't know any testimony, and then immediately said, oh, I do know testimony. The fact that toch kedei dibbur can reverse that, instead of generally, once you speak, you can't undo, that's a totally different use of toch kedei dibbur, and therefore it's teaching you in two different ways. Toch kedei dibbur works in two different types of ways. Okay, this is a bit of a complicated, or quite a complicated daf. Let's try to do a quick review of our daf. we started with the halach of Shmuel about Ratzach Harihem, and then we explained why you couldn't have learned it from these two other sources, one of them being our Mishnah. Then we moved to Hishbi Alehem Chamisha Pa'amim. And then we said it has to happen in court. And then we said, if that has to happen in court, the kfira, why not the Shevuot? And that's because we had this other source that wouldn't make sense if we said that. Then we moved to Kafrush Tehen Ke'echat. And then we had the whole thing. Yef Shadatam Same, or is it toch Kedei dibbur? Then we have Bezer Chazer Rishon Chayav, Hasheni Patur. They go one after the other, right? And then we tried to say, oh, this Mishnah doesn't match Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. And then we said, actually, it does, because you misunderstood Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, as we saw from this long statement of Abai, who basically talked about all these different cases of Shevuot Edut, where both Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and the rabbis either agree or disagree. And in one of them, it said they disagree specifically, and it explained the whole thing was Devar Garim Mamon, and it wasn't, is Edacham Chayiv Shevuot, is Edacham Chayiv Mamon. And that was, say, the bulk of the whole second part of the daf. And then we just ended with this issue of the kafar chavodah, how this doesn't seem to be teaching us anything new. And then they said, oh, it's teaching us something completely different, right? The case isn't exactly as it seemed. And then we explained, well, then what's the uniqueness according to Rabbi Yochanan? And we figured that out, that there's two different types of toch kedei dibbur. With that, we finished for today. Wishing everyone a Chag Sameach and Shin Shma B'Serot Tovot.